Another week commences, and so do we. It's McCowan, it's Shannon on the program for this Monday.
Lots of happening, huh? Lots happening. Boy, oh boy.
Lots going on. I want to talk a little bit about the Raptors later on and the Blue Jays performance later on, but hockey off the top. And we're always excited, thrilled to have the legendary coach, Scotty Bowman, with us. And we're going to address certainly the passing of Guy Lafleur, but also the playoffs too. Want to see what he sees. We're like less than 2 weeks, right?
May 2nd, 3rd, the playoffs will start.
Yeah, so we're getting close finally to the playoffs, and we're always intrigued by what Mr. Bowman thinks. And so Scotty Bowman will join us this time after these messages. We are back. It's McCowan and Shannon with you on this Monday, and we are pleased, as always, to be joined by our friend Scotty Bowman is with us. Still in Florida, Mr. Bowman?
Still in Sarasota, yes.
Getting ready for the Leafs to arrive somewhere, Florida or
Miami. I'll make
Tampa.
the first round anyways.
So if you were the Toronto Maple Leafs, not that we'll dwell on them in this conversation, but if you were the Toronto Maple Leafs, where would you rather play game one? Would you rather, well, you're going to be, if they play Tampa, they're going to be at home, but, and is there still a chance they could play Florida in the first round?
No, I don't think so.
I think it's pretty assured they'll play Tampa now.
Yeah.
Boston's too far behind. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the 8-1 game the other night was not reflective of what the series will be like, but how do you get by Tampa?
Well, they had a lot of adversity most of March and April, which might be a bonus in the long run, that it got everybody's attention, and they struggled. There's no question about it, but it's a long schedule, especially with the turnaround they had in the two cups. It was very, it was 2 months shorter, so it's going to be tough. Vasilevsky's played maybe a bit more than he has in other years, but he's got the pedigree of a great playoff goaltender. So that's going to be I think that's going to be a big question mark. They had a really good game last night against Florida, and their power play is syncing up again. Same 5 guys. It's a tough power play to defend.
Mm-hmm. So as a coach who won 4 in a row with one team and then 2 in a row with another and couldn't get the third one done, how do you keep your players engaged? How do you keep their killer instinct alive for a third Stanley Cup? Or is that just something that the players have?
Well, I think it's there, John, because the 2 cups were kind of rolled into each other. They didn't have the same as other teams did with getting the cup to their residences and everything else. But, it's been a 2-year plan, not much time off between cups, as you know, winning one, I think, in September, the other in July. So, and the euphoria of all the celebrations, it's all different than it was then, because when we would win the cup, everybody would reminding you to forget about it as quick as you can. Now they celebrate as much as they can. In fact, the team is in the White House today. That was a special trip. They took they apparently left by charter yesterday from Sunrise over the other side and the other coast, and they're going to be with the president today, and then I think they have a couple of road games too. It's not going to be easy.
So when you're contemplating the playoffs, we used to always say that the team that is more physical will have an advantage in the postseason because the play becomes tighter and more physical. Tampa is a team that can be physical, but that's not their agenda, really. The Maple Leafs are a team that has very little physicality. They're all skill. where does the advantage lie in that? And I understand, Scotty, the goaltending is going to be the key ingredient here. It always is in the playoffs. But how do you get past that inability or unwillingness to be a tight checking physical hockey team when it comes to the postseason?
Well, Tampa's, to me, an underlying part of their team is the size of their defense.
Mm-hmm.
They're big. They got a big defense. And in fact, in March, watching all the home games, they were taking a rash of penalties. They were really standing up for themselves. Fellas like Chernak and Hedman, they're big guys. McDonough missed a good stretch of games. He's a really valuable player for them. Ever since they made that trade, it changed their whole defense core. He's so valuable defensively. Hedman can eat up a lot of minutes. So they got a lot of size on the back end. And I don't think they definitely took too many penalties. They were getting beaten by penalty killing most of the time. And then it was taxing on some of their players. So no, I don't think it's their team. You got to be so careful with them because, when you have Hedman at the top of the power play and you got Kucherov, the way he's really starting to play. The Kucherov has come on the last 2 or 3 weeks. He seems to be what really stirs that offense. He's so. I mean, I watch him play every game, and he has some games where you get frustrated with things he does. But boy, he's way ahead of the game. And Stamkos on the other side, he's found that range again. It's a really tough power play. Point has not been as valuable this year. In fact, he was until last night. I know the other night he was a minus player all year, but yet again he's so good in that bumper position. So they'll get their lines back. Cooper did a pretty good job trying to bring in those new players. Like Paul has been a good addition, maybe a little more than Hagel. Hagel's younger, I guess, but inexperienced, but he's still they've added a lot of desire to the forward. And one player that has really come on, an unknown player from last year, is Ross Colton.
Mm-hmm.
He's into 22 or 23 goals, playing like a second or third line player. And they didn't play Sorelli last night. They have a lot of weapons, this team. I mean, it's going to take a lot of discipline. You don't want to put that team on the penalty kill, on the power play. That's going to be a big issue.
So what kind of stock do you put in an 8-1 loss that the Maple Leafs had the other night?
I don't think you put any in it at all because Matthews wasn't there, and I don't know what the story is with Muzzin. Muzzin didn't play for a while, and the goaltender Campbell. I mean, that to me is what Toronto's got to really. I mean, the big question mark for me with Toronto is, can Jack Campbell play like he did the first 2 or 3 months into the playoffs? He's not a kid. I mean, I think he's 29, so he's it's quite a challenge for him, but because he's going to get a lot of work. So, and you're looking, and every time I've always said with these goalies, the problem with these goalies, and I saw it in Detroit even, it was pretty tough for a guy like Chris Osgood, a young kid that was going to develop into a pretty steady goalie. And you look at the other end of the rink and you see a Patrick Roy or somebody like that. And we didn't get it done really in Detroit until we got the deal to get Mike Vernon. And
Mm-hmm.
Mike Vernon had the pedigree that he had a pretty good record against Patrick. And the last cup, of course, Dominic Hasek, he went up against Patrick. But that's the tough part, is going to be Jack Campbell looking down the other end if this Vasilevsky returns to the way he has played in the last 2 playoff runs.
Well, it raises this question then. If you're the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Campbell does not have a good game 1, are you committing to him? Is he your goaltender in the playoffs?
No question in my mind that to put an inexperienced goalie in that could be an NHL goalie, but you can't do tryouts. And I would think that Jack Campbell is the key to any success they could have. He's got to return to that play that he had a good stretch at the beginning of the season, the first maybe half, 2/3 of the season, and then he got into the injury problem, and I don't know how much of an injury he had, but that's the big issue for me with Toronto is give us that steady kind of goaltending that he gave at the beginning. The reason why they ended up having a badder season.
If they went to Shalgren, Scotty, that would be an absolute utter movement of desperation, wouldn't it?
I think so. I mean, I don't think there's any. I mean, I wouldn't discount any rookie goalie going in and being able to play, but it would be a big long range plan that I don't think is going to work.
Yeah, the dilemma you face, though, as you said, Scotty, is that Campbell really hasn't played well since the first 2 or 3 months of the season on any extended basis. He's had a couple of good nights, but he's had some bad nights too.
Yeah.
And as many bad as good, I would think. And a lot of that's been overcome in terms of wins and losses by the Maple Leafs offensive prowess. And I just wonder if he gives up 4 or 5, 6 in the first game, do you keep going back to him? And you would, huh?
I don't think they have any choice. But, I think they've been careful with him lately. They've been really, I mean, the injury part is something I'm not sure of, because it seems they've been very careful of when he's going to play. And, when he did come in and play, he played pretty well. So, but not enough of a run to say that he's back to where he was at the beginning. But I know at the beginning of the year, teams were, I've talked to teams that, and guys with other teams that were looking for free agent goalies, and they were thinking that this goalie, the Leafs, are not going to be able to sign him because they won't have the money that he's going to command. They were talking about in the range of maybe $5, $6, $7 million goalie when he was playing in the first month.
So, so just one more thing. So we have 9 or 10 days before the playoffs start. Mm-hmm. When a team has 2 or 3 games left, you're not going to move anywhere. You're not going to third. You're stuck at second. What would your discussion be with your goalie people and with the goaltender about how much he wants to play in the next couple of games?
Yeah, I would be very careful with him because of the injury factor, and because we know that's the one they have to count on. But obviously, you're going to play these games that they, like you said, once they clinch everything, they want to get the home ice for sure. That you don't want to put them into a situation where these are tough games. And I always found the last few games of a season that are kind of meaningless. A lot of the players, I never believed in resting and just saying to a player. I know the last team I was with, Detroit, those fellas like Lidstrom and that, they didn't want any time off. They didn't want to, and you didn't want to tell them that you could be tired. Let's rest. Mm-hmm. You could maybe cut the ice time down. And I think that's what you'd want to do the last few games is make sure you play all your players. And if you're going to do well in the playoffs, you can't just count on one line or anything. So that's what I think they got to do is you don't have to play them. I don't know what their schedule is. They only got a week left. So
yeah,
just get them ready. Just get them ready with the right kind of games.
Any chance that Tampa is the second best team in Florida?
Well, last night, I mean, I don't know how much you count that game. It wasn't a general type. It wasn't as spicy a game. In fact, I think even the NHL, they sent Rooney and they sent McCauley, maybe wanting to make sure, because those teams have been looking at each other now into the second year. So no, I think I don't know if the Panthers, to me, a big part of their team is going to be Ekblad. I don't know if they can. I know they've had a tremendous month. They went 13 games without a loss. They nearly set a record or something last night. But I can't see their defense core been able to handle these other teams without a guy like that. They've done it for a month or 6 weeks, but he's been a valuable player. They got the injury last year, mm-hmm. which I still think really hurt them. I mean, they went 6 games with it and they had the home ice, but they're not going to be an easy out. they've got a lot of good offensive players. Can they get the goaltending? Last night they went to the young guy, Spencer Knight, had a tough outing, and they had to bring Bobrovsky in partway through the game. And I mean, obviously, Bobrovsky is the. I was amazed at his record. They looked at his record last night. It's like 38-6. I didn't know he had such a 6 losses this year for Bobrovsky, but you know he's got to do it like he did wasn't he the goalie with Columbus?
Yes, he was.
Yes, sir. Yep.
That upset them, but he hasn't done it since.
Well, let's talk a bit about this, their matchup with Boston, a team that is, most people think, past its prime, but filled with experience in the postseason, and who play, or at least are capable of playing, a nasty and more typical playoff kind of game. How do you see that matchup? You have to like Florida based on the regular season point total, but that might not be an easy one for Florida.
No, they're going to play the lowest wild card team, like you mentioned. It's still up for grabs with Washington and Boston, isn't it, John?
Well, it could be Pittsburgh too now, Scotty.
Yeah,
Well,
Pittsburgh's sliding a bit. That's right.
Yeah.
But Boston, I caught them and I was impressed. The game they played a couple of weeks ago. The two players I was impressed of the most against the Lightning, and unusually, although I did see him play 3 or 4 years ago, he was a great player. Taylor Hall and DeBrusk both came in, and they were major league skaters. They went to a overtime in the 3-on-3. You could see the value and how those players. So Boston's added another layer other than Bergeron and Marchand, because they put DeBrusk up there, and they've made another line, with Charlie Coyle and Taylor Hall and Pasternak. So they're not just a one-trick pony now. I haven't seen enough of Hampus Lindholm, except for people that have said he's made a tremendous difference, because they are thin, and the McAvoys and these guys are going to play 25 minutes. There's no question about that.
But they have to hope that Lindholm is healthy. I mean, that's the
big. He's missed about a week or two, but he's back now. And the goaltending that night, Elmark looked like a real Hall of Fame goalie. But is he going to get? I think he'll get the nod over the kids. I would think.
Why? They both have the same amount of playoff experience.
I know, but I think he's. I don't know. Depends on Bruce Cassidy, but I think Elmark has played better the last month.
The team that we occasionally mention and raise a Spockian eyebrow about is the New York Rangers, who just keep playing well. And unlike most New York teams, and I guess this is extraneous of New York, inside New York, that's all they care about. But outside of New York, we don't pay that much attention to the Rangers. They're not involved in the conversation that much. It's mostly the Eastern teams. Well, it's Tampa and Florida mostly, and
the Atlantic
Carolina
teams.
earlier.
Yeah, the Atlantic teams. We tend to focus on that division rather than the Metro with Carolina and the Rangers and Pittsburgh and Washington.
This Rangers team, though, is very, very good. They're capable of winning a Stanley Cup, aren't they, Scotty?
Well, if you could say that Shesterkin is going to give the Rangers the goaltending that they've been able to give them, yes, they are a real valid entry. They had young players as depth players that I'm not sure how happy they were with Kako and Lafreniere, but now they've added. They didn't have a lot of depth. They added Vetrano, sort of a winger that can score. But the other one has been a good addition, Kopp. He was injured the last couple of games, but they've added a little depth. And I'm not sure at center ice if they're as strong as some of the clubs. That's the area where, they haven't. Strome is looking for a contract, but he's He's been a good player for them. Zibanejad. They've got enough Rangers. But they've played a lot of playoff hockey this year.
Mhm.
All those close games, and MSG's been a good home for them. So I have to look at a team when you can keep the puck out of the net pretty regularly the way they have. Then that they've had a lot of playoff games this season that are playoff type games.
Pittsburgh and Washington battling for, where they're going to finish. Teams that are similar in terms of experience, both of them their best players are advancing in age, maybe past their prime. Which of these two teams would scare you more going into the playoffs?
Well, Washington has been there. The question's always been with Washington of late goaltending.
Sure.
That's the area where you look at Washington and of course now Pittsburgh with the Tristan Jarry injury. That he had a pretty good season for a goalie unheralded, but I don't know if they can run without him. And I don't know the status. Is it a foot injury, John?
Yeah, it's a broken foot or a fracture in his foot. Yeah.
This is going to be tough for that team. So Washington, Ovechkin went into the boards pretty heavy last night. They think he's going to be okay, but they do have experience up front. They've got half a dozen really good playoff players up forwards that could turn it on at any minute. Laviolette's an experienced coach. So is Cassidy. So there's a lot of coaches that have got a lot of games under their belt. But I would say that those teams have to get the goaltending that's necessary in the playoffs, and they haven't got it during the season so far, except for Jerry has.
By the way, for everybody who's listening from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, it was Bob McCowan that said that Sydney might be over the hill, because I don't think Sydney's anywhere near.
I didn't say over. I did not say over the hill. I said
Bob,
past.
you kind of bailed on Sid. You kind of bailed on Sid Crosby there. I'm not bailing on Sid Crosby ever. He's a pretty good hockey player still, Scotty.
Yeah, they got enough up front. When you look at the experience they've got, if Malkin turns it on and off, they got experience at center ice. So I like Pittsburgh halfway through the year, and then I think it sort of caught up to them that they had some tough injuries, but they're a team. If they can get a pace to their game, you're right. Crosby, Rust, Gensel, they got enough up front to score.
Jeff Carter.
Keep the puck out of their net is going to be a big issue with the goaltending.
Yeah. So, you talk about, every team we seem to have brought goaltending up. And there's a lot of discussion. You've mentioned coaches a lot. But what is the role once you get into a playoff series? What does a coach do really? Does he just get out of the way, or does he become a buffer? What's the role of a coach during a series where the players have to play the game?
Well, make sure your players don't run to the media with the wrong statement is probably something but it's different now because there's so much media attention, and you can't hide. You can't say I don't want to talk to anybody. That doesn't happen anymore. So I would just say to be an even keel. You can't let them get too excited. You win the first two games at home if you're the high seed. So what? That's what you're supposed to do. And now you got to take your game on the road. And home and away in the playoffs has changed so much. They say the rinks are so much similar to each other, and that's a big factor. But I don't know how much of a factor it is because there was rinks like Chicago, Boston, Buffalo that were different, but most of the other rinks were 200 by 85.
The Montreal Forum wasn't, that.
Well, I had the corners. The corners were deeper in the Forum,
right,
than any other. If you the best comparison, Toronto and Montreal, there didn't seem to be as much ice at Maple Leaf Gardens as there was in the Forum because of the corners,
right,
and there was a lot of you had to be was not easy to play in your own end in the Maple Leaf Gardens. You seem to be crammed a lot, and I don't know, maybe it was because they had the walk around right next to the ice, and you felt sort of crammed in Montreal with the seats, the rail seats in both rinks, you know.
Before we take the break here, the one team we haven't mentioned in the East is Carolina, and they have relied on Anderson for a good portion of this year for their success. But we all know from his history in Toronto that he has, to date, failed to perform in the playoffs the way he has in the regular season. Are they good enough to win?
I think they're concerned about Freddie Anderson going into the playoffs. What I understand is he got that injury again. He's a goalie apparently that has to be right up 100%. Can he have any issues? He's had a terrific season quietly, but now there's no more quietness in the playoffs. Everybody, you kind of hide in Carolina. It's not a big media place, and they've had a terrific season. The last month has been up and down. Their defense is underrated. They're a big part of their attack. They're tough to handle. Brindamore plays a real forceful game. You know, he's got the horses to really chase the puck all the time. So, and they're tough to play in home. Carolina is a real tough place. I had never felt comfortable. I don't know why going into Carolina. There's something about that era, that the whole place. But I like a lot of their players, and they're not big, but they play pretty big for the most part. They really hustle.
Scotty Bowman is with us. We'll take the break. We'll come back and chat some more after these messages. McCowan and Shannon on the podcast / radio program for this Monday with the legendary Scotty Bowman. The West is still up in the air to some extent as to who will get in and who will not. But Colorado has been at the top of the food chain, at the top of everybody's attention, maybe not just in the West, but in the NHL in general. They got beat last night, I think.
They're lost 4 in a row now, Bob.
4.
Yeah. And one wonders, is that worthy of concern, or is that a team that knows where they're going and where they're going to be in the first round of the playoffs, kind of taking their foot off the gas? I don't know how much you've seen of them, but should that be concerning if you're a Colorado fan?
Yeah, I really watched Colorado quite a bit. I got to know one of their defensemen that got injured, Bowen Byram. I was doing some scouting a few years ago, and he's had nothing but bad breaks about concussions, but he's now back. What worries me about Colorado is if you could guarantee that it's going to be like a racetrack type of hockey, I don't think they could lose. But the playoffs tighten up, and I worry about their defense because the first tandem is as good a tandem as there is in the league, better than most. When you get Makar and Taves together, they're so offensive minded, and they're great skaters. They complement each other. The depth is where I look at, and they've been trying to nurse this young Gerard. Not a big defenseman. He hasn't put up the offense that you need. And what do you do in the second? Like Bowen Byram will probably play with Eric Johnson. He's an experienced guy. They didn't have him last year. They missed him. But once you get down after that, you got fellas like Manson, and they got Murray. He's always seems to be injured. You got McDermott as a big tough guy that hasn't played a lot of minutes. And then you got Darcy Kemper, who has had a banner season, but we're talking about playoffs now, and they have to play. But they've been playing without Landeskog. Rantanen's had a type of injury that I think there's a little concern. I don't know what kind of injury it's been, but he's been in and out. The thing with the Colorado is they have a terrific group of players that probably they're not going to be able to keep. And the three that come to mind are Kadri. He's had as good a season as you could ever expect. He's had some injuries. Burakovsky and Kushkin are both going to command on the open market pretty good contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So this you could be looking at a team that's going to be hard to duplicate for next season to keep all their players. They got 3 or 4 players that they're going to lose, and but on the other hand, keep the band together. One more good kick at the can. But if a team that plays Colorado, the only team I've seen them that's played them pretty well, at least 2 out of 3, Calgary. Calgary's a team game. They've played a close to the vest type of game because that's the way Calgary can play. They don't have to. They have a great line naturally of Gaudreau, Lindholm, and Kachuk, but they have other players that complement them, and their defense is very underrated.
Right.
So I'm a little concerned about Colorado, the type of hockey that they want to play, and that's been successful during the season. They just rolled along, scored goals at will, but they got to get healthy. Landeskog is going to start the playoffs. He's their captain. I think he's their most, well, I mean, not over McKinnon maybe, but he's so valuable. He keeps that team on an even keel. He can get face-offs. He's a good all-round player. So they'll need to get healthy, and they'll need to get him back playing pretty soon.
Minnesota, St. Louis, 2 teams that in the middle of the season we probably would have kind of overlooked, and you can't overlook them now. They're both real good and playing real well. Experience shouldn't be a problem for St. Louis, but it might be for Minnesota. How much weight do you put on that?
I worry about the Blues are hot right now. Their defense core is not like it was when they won the Cup in 19. They were big defensemen. Peter Angelo, Edmondson, Bouwmeester. They were big guys. Now they got some. This Falk is really an underrated defenseman. But he's not big. Torrey Krug is not big. I give an edge to Minnesota on defense. Goaltending maybe as well. Depends on who they play, but they got 2 of them probably they can play. That's going to be a terrific series. One good team is going to leave after the first round, which makes it really tough. But it's a toss-up. I would say Minnesota, the way they've had a home record, and I mean they're still not decided. Who's I think, are they even again, John?
Yeah, I think they're pretty close.
Maybe 1 point.
1 point, yeah, I think.
So that looks like as good a series as we're going to get in the first round.
So, man, you talked about goaltending in Minnesota. Cam Talbot's been lights out since Marc-Andre Fleury showed up. And Marc-Andre Fleury, I think, has only lost once or twice in his time there in 8 or 9 games. So do you pick a goalie and stick with him in that scenario, or do you tell them we're alternating no matter what? How do you manage those 2 goaltenders in a playoff series?
This is going to be a big decision for Dean Evason, because he's alternated all the way down the stretch.
Yes, he has.
I would imagine that would be an easy choice to make, but at the same time, you could get into a lot of controversy with if a goalie wins a game and gets a shutout. Aren't you going to?
Then you don't play him the next night, right?
Doesn't work, Bob. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's worked a bit, but historically, you got to get the goalie hot, and you got to keep him hot.
And the other thing about that is Cam. You assume, I think there's an assumption that Cam Talbot's going to be your goalie next year. There's no guarantee that Marc-Andre Fleury is even going to be around next year.
Yeah, I think as a coach, you don't worry about that though.
No, you wouldn't know.
That's Bill Guerin's problem, but I think Dean Evason, he's got the team playing abrasive. He's got to be careful on penalties. That's for sure, because you know you don't want to give a good team power plays at the wrong time. But I like their chances. They're a resilient team. They got a great player in Kaprizov.
Boy, do they ever.
They got some balance up front, and I like their defense. Last night Spurgeon got hurt. That could be a loss for them. But Brodin and these guys they're a really underrated defense. They're a legitimate team. They've lost, I think, 2 games out of 20, both to Nashville, who I don't consider as strong a threat as some others.
We want to take a few minutes, the last few minutes of this program, to talk about obviously the passing of Guy Lafleur, a player with whom you are obviously intimately familiar. In the last week or 10 days, we've lost Mike Bossy and Guy Lafleur, 2 great hockey players, neither of whom probably would be, if the 3 of us sat down and said, okay, who do you think are the 10 best players in the history of the National Hockey League? Would either of them be on that list?
Absolutely. Lafleur would be. Yeah.
They had Lafleur rated, I saw somewhere around 11, but I don't know who put him there. Like,
well, that's sort of my thought, is that he'd be on the fringe of that top 10. John doesn't agree.
No. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the coach of the Montreal Canadiens in 1978 agrees either.
No, I mean, the thing that they were so similar in what they could do, and they both got on strong teams that had other players on their team. Like, neither of them ever killed a penalty. You didn't have to worry about them defensively, because the other teams, once we got rolling in the playoffs, teams didn't want to take a chance on Bossy or Lafleur and try to go power against power. The teams didn't have enough. The only team in my era that had a line that you could really concern yourself with, because historically over a period of about 3 or 4 years, Clark, Barber, and Leach, they had records that will, if you went back and looked at their records, I remember once I looked at their record, and they were on the ice as a line one year for 25 goals even strength, 25 goals in, I think it was 76 or 80 games, but that was probably the one line. I never could play one line against them all the time. They would just overpower you. They had Bobby Clark's real toughness. Barber and Leach were such great scorers, but Lafleur never had, and Bossy, you just couldn't put good scorers against them, because the other team didn't have enough, and so they usually got checkers against them. Teams tried to check Lafleur and Bossy, and it couldn't. It never worked. And but those players, they were on teams that played 4 lines. They were on teams that had Hall of Fame players, but they were a team, and they had a lot of in Montreal. I mean, we did have 2 scoring lines when Lafleur came out of junior. Evac Cornway was in his prime. He was popping in 40 goals easy. And, a kid comes in from Quebec City, and he poor guy, he's going to try to play center. You're going to play against Bobby Clark. You're going to play against Phil Esposito, Stan Mikita, Jean Rattel. And those are good teams. New York, Boston, and Chicago and Philly were good teams. So it was not an easy transformation for Guy to come in and be a centerman. You just couldn't. He couldn't get faceoffs, and we already had Jacques Lemaire and Pete Mahovlich. They were really top of the line players. So it was tough on Lafleur. He had to find his niche, and he did it himself, because he got compared to Richard Martin. He got compared to Marcel Dion. They went to weaker teams at the time, although Richard went in with his good buddy Gilbert Perrault and the French Connection, and they were an awesome line. But it wasn't easy for Guy for 3 years. But he stayed out of the realm of the media. I'm not sure if the media they weren't very complimentary towards him, but it didn't bother him. He went his own way. So I keep saying that of all the players I had ever coached, he's one that I never had to coach. He's the one that did it himself.
Did you move him to the wing, no, Scotty? Or did he do?
Yeah,
did he come to you and say, "I want to play
no,
wing"?
He never ever came and complained about anything, and we moved them because we had Lemaire and we had Mahavlich, and we didn't really need to put him at center. We moved him because Boston was the team that we were always struggling to beat. They were the powerhouse in the early 70s.
Right.
It won in 70 and 72. They should have won in 71, and they probably could have won again the next year. Yeah, because Philly beat them. So he was he moved to right wing because the opposition was still there with Ivan Cornway. But I mean, if they want to check Cornway, then they have to check Lafleur. But I give him a lot of credit for developing his own style.
And is it true when you were coaching that when he was on the power play, you never worked on the power play in practice?
I don't know if we never worked, but we worked on a power play during the games. And he was 30%. But no, we found out with Lafleur though, and like a lot of good forwards, he was such an artist. The thing that Lafleur had that most didn't have, he could score goals, he could make plays.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Steve Shutt would mention the fact that how many goals did he score on plays that Lafleur created. But Lafleur was a player that on the power play was much better near the net than being on the point.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have to put him on the point very much because we had Larry Robinson and Guy Lafleur. But Lafleur was so much better near that net because it was shot. He had a quick release, and he just was a dynamic. Those 5 or 6 years, I didn't realize at the time until I see it now. When we getting 125 points at that time and doing it for 5 or 6 years in a row.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I've talked to a couple of people this weekend about it, is because we've all watched all the highlights this weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He made every goal look easy. It didn't look like work.
Yeah. Toe Blake told me once after he retired, and he used to travel with us, and he said that in his lifetime of hockey, the first player that ever grabbed him as a lift you out of your seats, as they say, Howie Morenz. And then he said, of course, I played and I also coached the Rocket, was number 2. And he mentioned Guy Lafleur as the third player in history of his time. The only other player he mentioned, and Toe was different than a lot of people, the player that he mentioned that as a spectator, he would go and pay the price to see him play in his prime was Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull, he said Bobby Hull could take that puck. Bobby Hull was a different type of player than any in the league. Bobby Hull, I do remember him taking the puck in his own end, and he would go all the way as far as he could with shot, of course. Mm-hmm. But he mentioned Lafleur and the Rocket and Morenz as players that, as a spectator, and you go to a game, and I know the same thing happened to me. I was a scout with the Canadians, and I went to see Bobby Orr play at 13 in a tournament in Gananoque, and I brought the landlord where I was rooming with. I was rooming with a bunch of Canadian Ottawa Rough Rider football players, guys like Lou Bruce and Kay Vaughn, and they had a rooming house near the football and hockey stadium. So I brought the owner to watch 2 guys play in Gananoque that everybody else was watching. They were playing for Gananoque, Doug Higgins and Ricky Eaton. And I was there 5 minutes. The man was a football man. He never knew much about hockey. And I told him to watch these 2 numbers. And he said, after 5 minutes, why don't you forget about those 2 and that number 2 on the other team? He was like 5'3". Yeah. And that was Bobby Orr. So, I mean, that's the way Lafleur was. You didn't have to be a fan to know how good he was.
Well, he also, I think we have to go, but he also suffered some in reputation because of the players that he followed. The Montreal Canadiens, you mentioned, the Rocket, then the Pocket Rocket, then Jean Beliveau, and then we're just scratching the surface with the great players for like 2 decades that preceded him. And
the whole aura of wearing that sweater, Scotty. The whole aura of wearing the sweater was bigger than it was bigger than life. That's why Saturday or Sunday night's ovation. I sent a note to a friend who's working for Canadians now. I said it was a master class in understanding what it was to be a Montreal Canadian player. Was that ceremony on Sunday night?
That's a good point for the players that are there now.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely correct.
Scotty, we wish you continued good health. Enjoy the playoffs. Don't come back.
I'll be right there at the Amalie Arena. Maybe if the Leafs are fortunate, I'm due to move up on the middle of May. It's a pretty easy trip to Toronto. So either way, I can't lose. Seeing some good hockey. Yeah.
Either way, we love to see you. Thanks as always. We love having you on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, John.
Okay, Scotty.
Scotty Bowman. We'll be back after these messages. And we are back. And our thanks to Scotty Bowman as always.
By the way, so
yes.
Scotty.
Yes.
I think Scotty could have given us every player on all 32 rosters.
That is astounding, isn't it? Like he rattles off the names and I was looking at him to see if he's looking at a monitor or
nope.
He's not.
Nope.
He knows every single player in the game.
I mean, we have the depth chart of the Colorado Avalanche blue line now at 7. I mean, it's just, I tell you what, he's such a delight. I have so much fun just sitting and listening to him.
Oh gosh, you and me both.
Yeah, no,
you and me both. We won't take a few minutes. Shaquille O'Neal was wrong. He predicted Philadelphia would beat the Raptors in 4 straight. That did not happen. So we have a game 5, but it's in Philadelphia. And your starting point guard probably won't play.
Right. Well, but I tell you what, though, Gary Trent did a heck of a job on Saturday. When you think about it, and that whole group, and Pascal Siakam took the mantle as well. That group played as well as we've seen in that 15 or 16 game run that we thought that they were going to get through the first round. They were impressive after Fred got hurt.
Well, they were impressive in game 3 too for a good portion of it. They kind of folded at the end, and then that kind of miracle shot by Embiid at the buzzer in overtime beat them. But they played, they were right there and as good as Philadelphia, if not better than Philadelphia, for games 3 and 4.
They got back to playing their style of game, Bob.
Yes, they did.
They got back, the first 2 games they were trying to play Philly ball. And the 2 games in Toronto, they started to play their own game, a true team concept. And boy, oh boy, I would not be surprised to see a game 6. I would not be surprised to see a game 6.
I'm told that Van Vliet is officially out for tonight's game, which doesn't surprise me even in the least. And we will see what that means. The Toronto Blue Jays darn near swept the Houston Astros in a wild one yesterday.
That was crazy.
That ended with a 10th inning home run to beat them after the Blue Jays had taken the lead in the top of the 10th inning.
And Romano's streak is over. Yeah, no.
You like this runner on second base thing rather than?
No, not anymore. I thought it was a gimmick for the pandemic. I like traditional baseball, Bob. I like traditional baseball.
What about, and I thought about this last night. I was driving in the car listening to the game. And I thought, well, maybe you should play an inning or 2 just to extend the game. And then if you get to, say, the 12th inning, then put the runner on second base.
So what's the difference, though? I mean, all you're doing is you're just prolonging, what's the difference? I mean, what they're obviously trying to get games down to under 3 hours somehow.
Well, they're trying to
some way.
get them under 4 hours.
You know,
They have no chance of getting them under 3.
I'm trying to be nice. Okay. I'm trying to be nice.
Well, it's you bastards in television that have screwed
No,
everything up, and nobody
stop.
blames you.
No,
But
it's not.
the endless commercials and promotional messages and crap that goes on. I don't know how TV gets away with it. That's the problem.
They pay for it, mister.
Would
They
you put a
pay
clock
for-
on the pitchers?
No. Listen, I think, hey, I mean, I would like to see the games faster. Absolutely. I would like to see 2 minutes between innings. Absolutely. I think that's a big part of it, but I like traditional baseball. I like the pace of traditional baseball. I
So
don't
you
have any
don't
complaints.
want the runner on second at
No,
any point. If they have to play
no.
22 innings and play till 4 in the morning, let them play.
Let them play, baby.
I'm not against that, to tell you the truth.
Come on, that's the magic of where were you in the 21st inning? I stayed up. I watched it.
Hey, pal, when I was, in the Blue Jays realm in those early years, those 15, 18, 17 inning games at Exhibition Stadium in the cold and fog. I mean, you'll remember those. And that's always been my point. I love Doc Halladay. And when he did an hour and 59 minutes
Sure.
at a 1-2-1, was great.
Mark Burley was the same way when he was here.
Loved it. But I remember all of those extra inning games.
But you know what? With the analytics and pitch counts and the guy's not going to get the third time through the batters. We're having more pitching changes. That's taking more time than ever.
Yeah, although they tried to cut that down with the 3 inning max minimum, or three batter minimum.
Yeah, how's that worked?
Well, really, it hasn't worked very well at all. I guess it probably has taken a minute or two off here and there, but
yeah.
Blue Jays lose yesterday, but
they're pretty darn good.
Fashion, they're pretty darn good, and it doesn't get any easier. They got the Red Sox next, and they got the Yankees, I think, again. So, and Houston again.
Yeah.
So, stay tuned. This is the tough stretch. This is as tough a beginning to a season as I think I've ever seen in terms of the schedule. And if they can get through this at or near the top, you'd think they'd be in good shape. We'll come back tomorrow. We thank you for watching or listening. For John Shannon, Bob McCowan. See ya.